Washington has pushed ahead with tough new laws on Chinese firms. They must now follow American auditing standards if they want to be listed on U.S. exchanges. And the move could lead to companies like Alibaba and Pinduoduo delisting from U.S. markets. Investors have been preparing for this for months, as some turning their eyes to the company's secondary listings in Hong Kong. But more than 100 companies still don't have a second listing, and analysts say these companies could go private, possibly at lower valuations. Ira Spitzer has more.
So the way this legislation works is that Chinese companies and their auditors would have 3 years to comply with U.S. regulations before their shares could potentially be removed from the U.S. exchanges. Now, the reason for this legislation in the first place is that China typically doesn't allow American regulators the type of access to its company's books that is required here, leaving investors potentially somewhat in the dark. China has pushed back against this new legislation, with the Chinese government saying that it is against what it called the politicization of securities regulation and saying that it is discriminatory against foreign firms. There are more than 250 Chinese firms listed on the American exchanges, including massive companies like Alibaba, and those firms are worth combined more than $2 trillion. Now, given everything at stake here, as well as the 3-year time frame, I wouldn't really see this as the end of negotiations, but rather the beginning. There certainly will be more to come in this saga. American regulators are reportedly working on another arrangement which would allow Chinese regulators to comply with the American regulations without violating Chinese law themselves. So there are things like that potentially in the works. We've also heard some criticism from the U.S. exchanges themselves, such as the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ, who would suffer if Chinese firms were to be forced out of those exchanges, given the trading volume and the listing fees that they receive. And in fact, the heads of both of those exchanges have criticized the legislation. But certainly, if President Trump signs this bill into law, it's just one of many thorny issues between Beijing and the incoming Biden administration when Joe Biden takes the office next month in January. Ira Spitzer, CNA, San Francisco.